Chapters on the Buddha teachings, chapter 16, about some salient characteristics of Buddhism. Well expounded is a Dhamma by the Exalted One to be self realized with immediate fruit, inviting investigation leading on to Nirvana, to be comprehended by the wise is for himself. Majjhima Nikaya. Foundations of Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths which the Buddha himself discovered and revealed to the world are the chief characteristics and the unshakable foundations of Buddhism. They are suffering, the raison d'etre of Buddhism, its cause, like craving its end, that is Nirvana, the summum bonum of Buddhism, and the middle way. The first three represents the philosophy of Buddhism, while the fourth represents the ethics of Buddhism in accordance with that philosophy. All these four truths which comprises the Dhamma of the Buddha are dependent on this body itself. They are incontrovertible facts wholly associated with man and other beings. Whether the Buddhas arise or not, these truths exist in the universe. It is the Buddhas that reveal them to the world. Buddhism rests on the pivot of suffering. Although Buddhism emphasizes the existence of suffering, it does not follow that Buddhism is a pessimistic religion. On the contrary, it is neither totally pessimistic nor totally optimistic but realistic. One would be justified in calling the Buddha a pessimist if he had merely emphasized the truth of suffering without suggesting a mean to end suffering and gain eternal happiness. The Buddha perceived the universality of sorrow and prescribed a remedy for this universal sickness of humanity. The highest conceivable happiness, according to the Buddha, is nirvana, which is the total extinction of suffering. The author of the article on pessimism in the Encyclopedia Britannica writes: pessimism denotes an attitude of hopelessness towards life, a vague general opinion that pain and evil predominate in human affairs. The original doctrine of the Buddha is in fact as optimistic as any optimism of the West. To call it pessimism, it is merely to apply to it a characteristically Western principle according to which happiness is impossible without personality. The true Buddhist looks forward with enthusiasm to absorption into eternal bliss. Happiness. The Buddha does not expect his followers to be constantly brooding on the ills of life and so make their life unhappy. Joy, piti, has to be cultivated by every Buddhist as one of the essentials or prerequisite of enlightenment. In the opinion of many unbiased writers, Buddhists are reputed to be the happiest people in the whole world. They have no inferiority complex that they are rest sinners. The members of the noble order who live the holy life in the fullest possible manner are perhaps the happiest persons. Aho Sukham. Oh, happy indeed. Oh, happy indeed. We shall be living in joy. Some of the oft repeated favorite sayings of his followers. One day, a certain deity approached the Buddha and questioned him thus: who in the forest make their wanted haunt? The saintly livers of the holy life, who by one daily meal do break their fast. Tell me how look they so serene of hue? The Buddha replied: they make no lamentation o'er the past. They yearns not after that which is not come. By what now is do they maintain themselves? Hence comes it that they look serene of hue. Happily, the bhikshus live in the eternal present with no worries about either the past or the future. Casual law in terms of happiness in the Samyutta Nikaya is found an interesting interpretation of the dependent origination. Pattika Samupada. In terms of happiness, the Buddha says, suffering leads to confidence, Shata, confidence to rapture, Pamoja, rapture to joy, piti, joy to tranquility, Siddhi, tranquility to happiness, Sukha, happiness to concentration, Samadhi, concentration to knowledge and vision of things as they truly are. Yatha Bhutanannadasan, the knowledge and vision of things as they truly are to repulsion, Nivayita, repulsion to non attachment, Viraga, non attachment to deliverance, Vimutti, deliverance to the extinction of passion, Khay Manna, that is to Arhantaship. This important passage clearly indicates how suffering can lead to happiness and ultimately to sainthood. Kindred Sayings, Part 1, page 78. Samyutta Nikaya, Volume 2, page 32. Kindred Sayings, Part 2, page 27. Tolerance of Buddhism. No blind faith is necessary to understand these four noble truths. The first two truths, which are mundane, Lokya, can be experienced by worldly themselves. The second two truths, which are super mundane, Lokuttara, can be experienced by attaining saintship. It is on the bedrock of these facts, which could be verified by personal experience and tested by anybody, that the Buddha Dhamma is built and not on the fear of the unknown. Buddhism is therefore rational and intensely practical. In the Dhamma, there is nothing that is impractical or irrational. The Buddha practiced what he taught what he practiced. What he most emphasizes in his teaching is practice, for creeds alone cannot purify a person. Dhammapada states, thou much he recites the sacred text but acts not accordingly. That heedless man is like a cowherd who counts others' cane. He has no share in the blessings of a recluse. Volume 9. A rational and practical system cannot contain any mysterious or esoteric doctrine. In the Parinibbana Sutta, the Buddha emphatically declares, I have taught the truth without making any distinction between esoteric and exoteric doctrine, for in respect of the truth, Tathagata has no such things as the closed fist of teacher who keeps something back. Anantaram and Aviram are the words used by the Buddha. If the Buddha had taught, this much of my doctrine I will not teach others, or only this much of my doctrine I will teach others, he would have fallen into the category of teachers who keep a closed fist. If the Buddha had taught, to these persons I will teach, or to these persons I will not teach, the Buddha would have created an inner circle and an outer circle. The Buddha makes no such distinctions. With respect to sacred doctrines, the Buddha says in the Anguttara Nikaya, O disciples, there are three to whom secrecy belongs and not openness. Who are they? Secrecy belongs to women, not openness. Secrecy belongs to priestly wisdom, not openness. Secrecy belongs to false doctrine, not openness. The doctrines and rules proclaimed by the perfect Buddha shine before all the world and not in secret. It is true that the Buddha had not expressed his views about some problems that perplexed mankind. He was characteristically silent on these controversial subjects because they were irrelevant to his noble mission and non-essential to one's emancipation. On a certain occasion, a certain bhikshu named Malankapta approached the Buddha and impatiently demanded an immediate solution of some speculative problems on the threat of discarding the robe forthwith. Lord, he said, these theories have not been elucidated, have been set aside and rejected by the Exalted One. Whether the world is eternal or not eternal, whether the world is finite or infinite, whether the life principle, Jiva, is the same as the body, or whether the life principle is one and the body is another, whether the Tathagata after death is or is not, whether the Tathagata after death both is and is not, whether the Tathagata after death neither is nor is not. See chapter 14, page 223 224, page 1, part 1, page 261. The Buddha advised him not to waste time and energy over such ideal speculations, which was detrimental to moral progress. It is as if a person were pierced by an arrow thickly smeared with poison, and he should say to the surgeon who wants to extract it, I shall not allow the arrow to be extracted until I know the details of the person who wounded me, the nature of the arrow with which I was pierced, etc. That person would die before this would ever be known by him. In the same way, that person would die before these questions had ever been elucidated. The solving of these metaphysical questions did not lead to aversion, passionlessness, enlightenment, nor nirvana. On another occasion, when his disciples shout information about these points, he silenced them by citing the parable of the elephant and blind man. An elephant was presented to some blind men to describe what it looked like. Those who touched the different parts of the elephant's body expressed their own peculiar ideas about the elephant. They argued amongst themselves, and their arguments naturally ended in a quarrel. Unless speculations that do not tend to emancipation and that merely gratify curiosity, the Buddha dismisses with his characteristic silence. Buddhism does not profess to provide an explanation to all ethical and philosophical problems that interest mankind. Majjhima Nikaya Kuttamallukya Sutta number 63. See Uddana volume 6, page 4, Woodward, Some Sayings of the Buddha, page 277 to 288. Neither does it deal with the ideal speculations and theories, things that do not tend to edification. Buddhism has a practical and a specific purpose, the cessation of suffering. And with that goal in view, all irrelevant side issues are completely set aside. Nevertheless, every encouragement is given to keen investigation into the real nature of life. No corrections, persecutions, or fantasism plays any part in Buddhism. To the unique credit of Buddhism, it must be said that throughout its peaceful march of 2500 years, no drop of blood has been shed in the name of the Buddha. No mighty monarch has wielded his powerful sword to propagate the Dhamma, and no conversion has been made either by force or by repulsive methods. Yet the Buddha was the first and the greatest missionary that lived on earth. Buddhism has spread and is still spreading rapidly throughout the world and is making peaceful penetration to all countries, mainly owing to the intrinsic merit and unsurpassing beauty of its teachings, and not at all with the aid of imperialism, militarism, or any other indirect proselytizing agencies. Aldous Huxley writes, alone of all the great world religious, Buddhism made its way without persecution, censorship, or inquisition. In all these respects, its record is enormously superior to that of Christianity, which made its way among people wedded to materialism and which was able to justify the bloodthirsty tendencies of its adherents by an appeal to savage Bronze Age literature of the Old Testaments. Lord Russell remarks of the great religions of history, I prefer Buddhism. especially in its earliest forms, because it has had the smallest element of persecution. In the name of the Buddha, no sacred place was reddened with the blood of innocent women, no sincere thinkers were burnt alive, and there was no merciless roasting of heretics. Buddhism, which teaches nothing mysterious, does not speak of miracles. The Buddha no doubt possessed supernormal powers as a result of his mental culture, but he did not perform miracles. Yamaka Patiharya, for instance, erroneously rendered twin miracle, is a psychic phenomenon which only a Buddha can perform. In this particular case, by his psychic powers, he makes fire and water issue from the pores of the body simultaneously. But this appeals more to the intellect than to the emotion. It is concerned more with the character of the devotees than with their numerical strength. On one occasion, Upali, the millennial follower of Nigathanataputta, approached the Buddha and was so pleased with the Buddha's exposition of the Dhamma that he instantly expressed his desire to become a follower of the Buddha. But the Buddha advised him, saying, "Of variety, O householder, make a thorough investigation. It is well for a distinguished man like you to make a thorough investigation." Upali, who was overwhelmed with joy at this unexpected utterance of the Buddha, said, "Lord, if I had become a follower of another teacher, his followers would have taken me round the streets in the procession, proclaiming that such a millionaire had renounced his former religion and had embraced theirs. But Lord, you advise me to investigate further. The more pleased am I with this salutary advice of yours." See chapter 8, page 113, note 1. And he appreciatively repeated for the second time, "I seek refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha." Thou he became a Buddhist by conviction. The Buddha, quite in keeping with his boundless compassion and perfect tolerance, advised him to support his former religious teacher in accordance with his practice, exhorting all seekers of truth not to be influenced by external authorities or by mere persuasion. The Buddha even went to the extent of requesting his disciples not to bow down submissively to superior authority. Buddhism is saturated with this spirit of free inquiry and complete tolerance. It is the teaching of the open mind and the sympathetic heart which lightening and warming the whole universe with its twin rays of wisdom and compassion, shades its genial glow on every being struggling in the ocean of birth and death. So compassionate and tolerant was the Buddha that he did not exercise his power to give commandments to his lay followers. Instead of using the temperative, "thou shalt" or "thou shalt not," he says, "It beholds you to do this, it beholds you not to do this." The ordinary precepts which Buddhists are expected to observe are not commandments but modes of discipline, Shikkapada, which they take of their own accord. This tolerance and sympathy the Buddha extended to men, women, and all living beings. Buddhism and caste. It was the Buddha who, for the first time in the known history of mankind, attempted to abolish slavery and invented the higher morality and the idea of the brotherhood of the entire human race, and in striking terms condemned the degrading caste system which was firmly rooted in Indian society at that time. The Buddha declared, "By birth is not one an outcast, by birth is not one a Brahmin, by deeds is one an outcast, by deeds is one a Brahmin." Vasattha Sutta relates that two young Brahmins had a discussion with regard to what constitutes a Brahmin. One maintained that birth made a Brahmin, while the other contended the conduct made a Brahmin. As neither could convince the other, both of them agreed to refer the matter of the Buddha and refer the matter to the Buddha for his consideration and further utterance. So they approached the Buddha and presented their case before him. The Buddha at first reminded the questioners that although in the case of plants, insects, quadrupeds, means arthropods, quadrupeds, serpents, fishes, and birds, there are many species and marks by which they could be distinguished. Yet in the case of men, there are no such species and marks. Then he explained how men differentiated themselves according to their various occupations. In conclusion, the Buddha condemned birth makes no Brahmin, nor non Brahmin makes this life, and doing that mold a Brahmin true. Their lives molds farmers, tradesmen, merchants, serfs. Their lives molds robbers, soldiers, chaplains, kings. Another interesting dialogue concerning this problem of caste appears in the Madhura Sutta. Sutta Nipata Vasalla Sutta, IB page 115, Majjhima Nikaya volume 2 page 83 to 90. The king of Madura makes the following report to the Venerable Kachana. The Brahmin says thus Kachana. The Brahmins are the most distinguished of the four divisions into which the people are classified. Every other division is inferior. The Brahmins alone are accounted pure, not these who are not Brahmins. The Brahmins are the legitimate sons of Brahma, born from his mouth, especially made by him heirs of Brahma. What do you, sir, say to this? The Venerable Kachana replied that it was an empty assertion and pointed out how a wealthy person could employ as his servants members of any class or caste, and how a vicious person could be born in a woeful state and a virtuous person in a blissful state despite their particular caste. Adding that a criminal, irrespective of his caste, would be punished for his crime. He emphasized the fact that all joining the order receive equal honor and reverence without any discrimination. According to Buddhism, caste or color does not preclude one from becoming an adherent of the Buddha or from entering the noble order of the Sangha, where all are treated as Aryas. Fishermen, scavengers, Cartesians, together with the warriors and Brahmins, were freely admitted into the order and were also given positions of rank. Upali, the barber, was made in preference to all others, chief disciple in matters pertaining to the Vinaya discipline. Sunita, who was honored by kings and nobles as an arhat, was a timid scavenger. The philosophic Sati was the son of a fisherman. The courtesan Ambapali joined the order and attained arhatship. Rajamala, who was converted by the Buddha as she was about to commit suicide, was a slave girl. So was Punna, whose invitation to spend a rainy season was accepted by the Buddha in preference to that of the millennial Anathapindika, her own master. Shubha was the daughter of a smith. Kappa was the daughter of a deer stalker. Such instances could be multiplied from the books to show that portals of Buddhism were wise open to all without any distinction. The Buddha provided equal opportunities for all and raised rather than lowered the status of people. In Buddhism, one finds milk for the babe and meat for the strong, and it appeals equally to both the rich and the poor. Buddhism and women. It was also the Buddha who raised the status of women and brought them to a realization of their importance to society. Before the advent of the Buddha, women in India were not held in high esteem. One Indian writer, Hemachandra Chandra, looked down upon women as the torch lighting the way to hell. Narakamagadavarsya Devika. The Buddha did not humiliate women but only regarded them as feeble by nature. He saw the innate good of both men and women and assigned to them their due places in his teaching. Sex is no barrier for purification or service. Sometimes the Pali term used to connote woman Matugama, which means mother folk or society of mothers, as a mother of woman holds an honorable place in Buddhism. The mother is regarded as a convenient ladder to ascend to heaven, and a wife is regarded as the best friend, Parama Shaka of the husband. Although at first the Buddha refused to admit women into the order on reasonable grounds, yet later he yielded to the entreaties of Venerable Ananda and his foster mother, Mahaprajapati Gautami, and founded the other order of Bhikshunis nuns. It was the Buddha who thus founded the first society for women with rules and regulations. Just as Arahants Sariputta and Moggallana were made the two chief disciples in the order of bhikshus, the oldest democratically constituted celibate order. Even so, the Arhants Khema and Upalabhanna were made the two chief female disciples in the order of Bhikshunis. Many other female disciples too were named by the Buddha himself as amongst most distinguished and pious followers. Amongst the Vajjistu, freedom to women was regarded as one of the causes that led to their prosperity. Before the advent of the Buddha, women did not enjoy sufficient freedom and were deprived of an opportunity to exhibit their innate spiritual capabilities and their mental gifts. In ancient India, as it still seems today, the birth of a daughter to a family was considered an unwelcome and cumbersome addiction. On one occasion, while the Buddha was conversing with King Kausala, a messenger came and informed the king that a daughter was born unto him. Hearing it, the king was naturally displeased, but the Buddha comforted and stimulated him, saying, "A woman child, O Lord of women, or Lord of men, may prove even a better offspring than a male." To women who were placed under various disabilities before the appearance of the Buddha, the establishment of the order of Bhikshunis was certainly a blessing. In this order, queens, princesses, daughters of noble families, widows, braver mothers, helpless women, courtesans, all despite their caste. Kindred Sayings, Part 1, page 111, see page 202. So, in this order, queens, princes, daughters of noble families, widows, bereaved mothers, helpless women, courtesans, all despite their caste or rank met on a common footing, enjoyed perfect consolation and peace, and breathed in that free atmosphere which was denied to those cloistered in courtesan palatial mansions. Many who otherwise would have fallen into oblivion distinguished themselves in various ways and gained their emancipation by seeking refuge in the order. Khema, the first chief female disciple, was the beautiful consort of King Bimbisara. She was at first reluctant to see the Buddha as she heard that the Buddha used to refer to external beauty in disparaging terms. One day she paid a casual visit to the monastery merely to enjoy the serenity of the place and the scenery of the place. Gradually, she was attracted to the hall where the Buddha was preaching. Gradually, she was attracted to the hall where the Buddha was preaching. The Buddha, who read her thoughts, created by his psychic powers, a handsome young lady, standing aside, fanning him. Khema was admiring her beauty. The Buddha made this created image change from youth to middle age and old age, till it finally fell on the ground with broken teeth, grey hair, and wrinkled skin. Then only did she realize the vanity of external beauty and the fleeting nature of life. She thought, has such a body come to be wrecked like that? Then so will my body also. The Buddha read her mind and said, "They who are slaves to lust drift down the stream like to a spider gliding down the web. He of himself wrote but the least. All their bonds have snapped in twain, with thoughts elsewhere intent, forsake the world, and all delight in sense put far away. Psalm of the Sisters, page 82. Kshema attended her handship and with the king's consent entered the order. She was ranked foremost in insight amongst the Bhikshunis. Pattikara, who lost her two children, husband, parents, and brother under very tragic circumstances, was attracted to the Buddha's presence by his willpower. Hearing the Buddha's soothing words, she attained the first stage of sainthood and entered the order. One day, as she was washing her feet, she noticed how first the water trickled a little way and subsided. The second time it flowed a little further and subsided, and the third time it flowed still further and subsided. Even so do mortals die, she pondered, either in childhood or in middle age or when old. The Buddha read her thoughts and projecting his image before her taught her the Dhamma. She attained her handship and later became a source of consolation to many bereaved mother. Dhammadinna and Bhaddakapalini were two Bhikshunis who were honored exponents of the Dhamma. In answer to Mara the evil one, it was Bhikshuni Soma who remarked, what should the woman nature count in her who, with mind well set and knowledge advancing, has right to the Dhamma? To one who entertains doubts with the questions, am I a woman in these matters or am I a man or what am I? The evil one is fit to talk. Amongst the latitude there were many women who were distinguished for their piety, generosity, devotion, learning, and loving kindness. Sikandar Singh's Part 1, page 162. Vishakha, the chief benefactress of the order, stands foremost amongst them all. Supriya was a very devout lady who, being unable to procure some flesh from the market, cut a piece of flesh from her thigh to prepare a soup for a sick bhikshu. Nakula Mata was a faithful wife who, by reciting her virtues, rescued her husband from the jaws of death. Samavati was a pious and lovable queen who, without any ill will, radiated loving kindness towards her rival even when she was burned to death through her machination. Queen Mallika on many occasions consoled her husband, King Vasenadi. A maid servant, Kujuttara, secured many coverts by teaching the Dhamma. Punnabasumata was so intent on hearing the Dhamma that she hushed her crying child thus, O silence, little Uttara, be still. Punnabasu, that I may hear the norm, taught by the Master, by the wisest man, dear unto us is our own child, and dear our husband, dearer still than this to me, agent of this doctrine to explore the path. A contemplative mother, when questioned why she did not weep at the loss of her only child, said, Uncalled he neither come, uncalled he either come unbidden son to go. Yon as he came, he went. What cause is here for woe? See chapter 10, page 162 173. Kindred Sayings 5, part 1, page 270. Jataka translation VP 110, note 354. Sumanna and Subhadda were two sisters of exemplary character who had implicit faith in the Buddha. These few instances will suffice to illustrate the great part played by women in the time of the Buddha. Then Buddhism and harmlessness. The boundless kindness of the Buddha was directed not only to all human beings but also to the dumb animals as well. It was the Buddha who banned the sacrifice of animals and admonished his followers to extend their loving kindness, metta, to all living beings, even to the tiniest creature that crawled at one's feet. No man, he taught, has the right to destroy the life of another, as life is precious to all. A bhikshu is expected to exercise this loving kindness to such an extent that he is forbidden by the Vinaya rules even to dig or cows to dig the ground. He cannot even drink water without it being filtered. Ashoka, the greatest Buddhist king, wrote on rock and monolith sayings, the living must not be nourished with the living. Even calf with insects must not be burnt. A genuine Buddhist must practice this metta towards every living being and identify himself with all, making no distinctions whatever. It is this Buddhist metta, one of the most salient characteristics of Buddhism, that attempts to break all the barriers of caste, color, and creed which separate one man from another. If followers of different faiths cannot meet on a common platform like brothers and sisters just because they belong to different religions, then surely the religious teachers have failed in their noble missions. In that noble toleration edict, which is based on the Kula Vyuha and Mahavyuha Sutta, King Ashoka says, Concourse alone is best, that is, all should hearken willingly to the doctrines professed by others. In its teachings, Buddhism has no features to confine it to any particular nation or any particular country. It is universal in its appeal. To the Buddhist, there is no far or near, no enemy or foreigner, no renegade or untouchable. Since universal love, realized through understanding, has established the brotherhood of all living beings, a real Buddhist is a citizen of the world. Some salient characteristics of Buddhism are therefore its rationality, practicability, efficacy, non aggressiveness, harmlessness, tolerance, and universality. Buddhism is the noblest of all unifying and uplifting influences that has operated for more than 2500 years. Nations have came and gone. Empires built on might and force have flourished and perished. But the Dhamma empire of the Buddha, founded on love and reason, still flourishes and will continue to flourish as long as its followers adhere to its noble principles. So it's a dedication to Buddhas, and we must learn, we must admire his teachings, which will be fruitful for us and which will be guiding the society as long as it was being. Then next chapter 17 will deal about the four noble truths. Light arose in me in things not heard before, Dhammacakka Sutta. Truth Satya is that which is its Sanskrit equivalent is Satya, which means an incontrovertible fact. According to Buddhism, there are four such truths pertaining to this so called being. In the Rohitas Sutta, the Buddha states, in this very one fathom long body, along with its perceptions and thoughts, do I proclaim the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world. In this particular context, the term world, loka, implies suffering. This interesting passage refers to the Four Noble Truths which the Buddha himself discovered by his own intuitive knowledge. Whether the Buddhas arise or not, these truths exist, and it is a Buddha that reveals them to the deluded world. They do not and cannot change with time because they are eternal truths. The Buddha was not indebted to anyone for his realization of them. He himself said they were unheard before. These truths are in Pali termed Arya Satchani. They are so called because they were discovered by the greatest Arya, the Buddha, who was far removed from passion. See Chapter 6, Samayutta Nikaya, page 62, see Kinder Sayings, Part 1, page 86. Hence, there is no justification for the statement that Buddhism is a natural outgrowth of Hinduism, although it has to be admitted that there exist some fundamental doctrines common to both, and that is because those doctrines are in accordance with eternal truth or Dhamma. The first truth deals with dukkha, which for need of a better English equivalent is rendered by suffering or sorrow. As a feeling, dukkha means that which is difficult to be endured. Do matlab difficult, kha matlab to endure. As an abstract truth, dukkha is used in the sense of contemptible do and emptiness, kha. The world rests on suffering, hence it is contemptible. The world is devoid of any reality, hence it is empty or void. Dukkha therefore means contemptible void. Average men are only surface seers, and Arya sees things as they truly are. To an Arya, all life is suffering, and he finds no real happiness in this world which deceives mankind with illusory pleasures. Material happiness is merely the gratification of some desire. No sooner is the desired things gained than beings to be crowned. Insatiate are all desires. All are subject to birth, jati, and consequently to decay, jara, disease, vyadi, and finally to death, marana. No one is exempt from this four inevitable cause of suffering. Impeded wish is all suffering. So the impeded wish is also suffering. We do not wish to be associated with things or persons we detest, nor do we wish to be separated from things or persons we love. Our cherished desires are not, however, always gratified. What we least expect or what we least desire is often thrust on us. At times, such unexpected, unpleasant circumstances become so intolerable and painful that weak, ignorant folk are compelled to commit suicides, as if such an act would solve the problem. Real happiness is found within and is not to be defined in terms of wealth, power, honors, or conquest. If such worldly possessions are forcibly or unjustly obtained, or are misdirected, or even viewed with attachment, they will be a source of pain and sorrow for the possessors. Ordinarily, the enjoyment of sensual pleasures is the highest and only happiness to an average person. There is no doubt a momentary happiness in the anticipation, gratification, and recollection of such fleeting material pleasures, but they are illusory and temporary. According to the Buddha, non attachment, vairagata, or the transcending of material pleasures, is a greatest bliss. In brief, this composite body itself is a cause of suffering. This first truth of suffering, which depends on this so called being and various aspects of life, is to be carefully analyzed and examined. This examination leads to a proper understanding of oneself as one really is. The cause of this suffering is craving or attachment, tanha, which is the second noble truth. The Dhammapada states, from craving springs grief, from craving springs fear. For him who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief, much less fear. Volume 216. This craving is a powerful mental force latent in all and is the chief cause of most of the ills of life. It is this craving, gross or subtle, that leads to repeated births in samsara and makes one cling to all forms of life. The grossest forms of craving are attenuated on attaining Sakadagami, the second stage of sainthood, and are eradicated on attaining Annagami, the third stage of sainthood. The subtle forms of cravings are eradicated on attaining Arahantaship. Both suffering and craving can only be eradicated by following the middle way, enunciated by the Buddha himself, and attaining the supreme bliss of nirvana. The third noble truth is the complete cessation of suffering, which is nirvana, the ultimate goal of Buddhists. It is achieved by the total eradication of all forms of cravings. This nirvana is to be comprehended by the mental eye by renouncing all internal attachment to the external world. This truth has to be realized by developing the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the fourth noble truth. This unique path is the only straight route that leads to nirvana. It avoids the extreme of self mortification that weakens one's intellect and the extreme of self indulgence that retards one's moral progress. It consists of the following eight factors. Number one, right understanding, sammaditthi, right thoughts, sammasankalpa, right speech, sammavakka, right action, sammakamanta, right livelihood, sammajiva, right efforts, sammavanma, right mindfulness, sammasati, and right concentration, sammasamadhi. Number one, right understanding is explained as the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. In other words, it is the understanding of oneself as one really is, because as the Rohitashva Sutta states, these truths are concerned with the 1 fathom long body of man. The keynote of Buddhism is this right understanding. Number two, clear vision or right understanding leads to clear thinking. The second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is therefore Samma Samkalpa. The English renderings, right resolutions, right aspirations do not convey the actual meaning of the Pali term. Right ideas or right mindfulness comes close to the meaning. Right thoughts may be suggested as the nearest English equivalent. By some kappa is meant the vitika mental state, which for want of a better rendering may be called initial application. This important mental state eliminates wrong ideas or notions and helps the other moral adjunct to be diverted to nirvana. It is one's thoughts that either defile or purify a person. One's thoughts molds one's nature and controls one's destiny. Evil thoughts tend to debase one just as good thoughts tend to elevate one. Sometimes a single thought can either destroy or save a world. Sammasamkappa solves the double purpose of enlightening evil thoughts and developing pure thoughts. Sammasamkappa solves the double purpose of eliminating evil thoughts and developing pure thoughts. Right thoughts in this particular connection are threefold. They consist of number one, nekkhamma, renunciation of worldly pleasures or selflessness, which is opposed to attachment, selfishness, and self possessiveness. Number two, avyapada, loving kindness, goodwill, or benevolence, which is opposed to hatred, ill will, or aversion. And number three, abhihimsa, harmlessness or compassion. It's ahimsa, which is opposed to cruelty and callousness. Gandhi also mentions about this ahimsa. These evil and good forces are latent in all. As long as we are worldling, these evil forces rise to the surface at unexpected moments in disconcerting strengths. When once they are totally dedicated on attaining a handship, one's stream of consciousness gets perfectly purified. Attachment and hatred, coupled with ignorance, are the chief cause of all evil prevalent in this deluded world. The enemy of the whole world is lust, through which all evils comes to living beings. This lust, when obstructed by some cows, is transformed into wrath. One is either attached to desirable external objects or is repulsed with aversion in the case of undesirable objects. Through attachment, one clings to material pleasures and tries to gratify one's desire by some means or other. Through aversion, one recoils from undesirable objects and even goes to the extent of destroying them, as their very presence is a source of irritation. With the giving up of egoism by one's one intuitive insight, both attachment and hatred automatically disappear. Dhammapada states, there is no fire like lust, no grief like hate. There is no net like delusion, no river like craving. Number one, as one ascends the spiritual ladder, one renounces by degrees both gross and subtle attachment to material pleasures like grown up children giving up their petty toys. Being children, they cannot be expected to possess an adult's understanding, and they cannot be convinced of the worthlessness of their temporary pleasures. With maturity, they begin to understand things as they truly are, and they voluntarily give up their toys. As the spiritual pilgrim proceeds on the upward path by his constant meditation and reflection, he perceives the futility of pursuing base material pleasures and the resultant happiness in forsaking them. He cultivates non attachment to the fullest degree. Happy is non attachment in this world. So is the transcending of all sensual pleasures, is one of the early utterances of the Buddha. Number two, the other most rebellious passion is anger, aversion, ill will, or hatred, all of which are implied by the Pali term vyapada, and consumes the person in whom it springs and consumes others as well. The Pali term avyapada, literally non enmity, corresponds to that most beautiful virtue, metta, Sanskrit maitri, which means loving kindness or goodwill towards all without any distinction. He whose mind is full of loving kindness can harbor no hatred towards any. Like a mother who makes no difference between herself and her only child and protects it even at the risk of her own life. Even so does the spiritual pilgrim who follows this middle path radiates his thoughts of loving kindness, identifying himself with all. But this metta embraces all living beings, animals not excluded. Number three, ahimsa or karuna. Harmlessness or compassion is the third and the last member of Samkalpa. Karuna is that sweet virtue which makes the tender hearts of the noble quiver at the suffering of others. Like Buddhist metta, Buddhist karuna too is limitless. It is not restricted only to co-religionist or co-national or to human beings alone. Limited compassion is not true karuna. A compassionate one is as soft as a flower. He cannot bear the sufferings of others. He might at times even go to the extent of sacrificing his own life to alleviate the sufferings of others. In every Jataka story, it is evident that the Bodhisattva endeavored his best to help the distressed and the forlorn and to promote their happiness in every possible way. Karuna has the characteristics of a loving mother whose thoughts, words, and deeds always tend to relieve the distress of her sick child. It has the property of not being able to tolerate the sufferings of others. Its manifestation is perfect non-violence and harmlessness. That compassionate person appears to be absolutely non-violent and harmless. The sight of the helpless states of the distress is the proximate cause for the practice of karuna. The consummation of karuna is the eradication of all forms of cruelty. The direct enemy of karuna is cruelty, and the indirect enemy is homely grief. Buddhist metta appeals to both the rich and the poor, for Buddhism teaches its followers to elevate the lowly, help the poor, the needy, and the forlorn, tend to seek comfort, the bewildered, pity the wicked, and enlighten the ignorant. Compassion forms a fundamental principle of both Buddhist laymen and bhikshus. Speaking of Buddhist harmlessness, Aldous Huxley writes Indian pacifism finds its complete expression in the teachings of the Buddha. Buddhism teaches ahimsa or harmlessness towards all beings. It forbids even laymen to have anything to do with the manufacture and sale of arms, with the making of poison and intoxicants, with shouldering or the slaughtering of animals. The Buddha advises his disciples thus. Wherefore, O bhikshus, however men may speak concerning you, whether in season or out of season, whether appropriately or inappropriately, whether courteously or rudely, whether wisely or foolishly, whether kindly or maliciously, thus, O bhikshus, must you train yourself. Unsullied shall our minds remain, neither shall evil words escape our lips. Kind and compassionate ever shall we abide with hearts harboring no ill will, and we shall enfold these very persons with the streams of loving thoughts unfailing, and forth from them proceeding we shall radiate the whole wide world with constant thoughts of loving kindness, ample, expanding, measureless, free from enmity, free from ill will. Thus must you train yourselves. He whose mind is free from selfish desires, hatred, and cruelty, and is saturated with the spirit of selflessness, loving kindness, and harmlessness, lives in perfect peace. He is indeed a blessing to himself and others. Number three, right thoughts lead to right speech. The third factor, it deals with refraining from falsehood, slandering, harsh words, and frivolous talk. He who tries to eradicate selfish desires cannot indulge in uttering falsehood or in slandering for any selfish end or purpose. He is truthful and trustworthy and even seeks the good and beautiful in others instead of deceiving, defaming, denouncing, or disuniting his own fellow beings. A harmless mind that generates loving kindness cannot give vent to harsh speech which first debases the speaker and then hurts another. What he utters is not only true, sweet, and pleasant, but also useful, fruitful, and beneficial. Number four, right speech follows right action, which deals with abstinence from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. These three evil deeds are caused by craving and anger, coupled with ignorance, with the gradual elimination of these casual causes from the mind of the spiritual pilgrim. Blameworthy tendencies arising therefrom will find no expression. Under no pretense would he kill or steal. Being pure in mind, he would lead a pure life. Purifying thoughts, words, and deeds at the outset, the spiritual pilgrim tries to purify his livelihood, right livelihood, by refraining from the five kinds of trade which are forbidden to a lay disciple. They are trading in alms, Sattavan human beings, Sattavan flesh, Mammasavan and that is breeding animals for slaughter, intoxicating drinks, Majjavan and poison, Vishavan hypocritical conduct is cited as wrong livelihood for monks, strictly speaking from an Abhidhamma standpoint. By right speech, right action, and right livelihood are meant three abstinences, vritti, but not the three opposite virtues. Number six, right effort is fourfold, namely, number one, the endeavor to discard evil that has already arisen. Number 2, the endeavor to prevent the arising of unarisen evil. Number 3, the endeavor to develop unarisen good. And number 4, the endeavor to promote the good which has already arisen. Right effort play a very important part in the Noble Eightfold Path. It is by one's own effort that one's deliverance is obtained and not by merely seeking refuge in others or by offering prayers. And men are found a rubbish heap of evil and a storehouse of virtues. By effort one removes this rubbish heap and cultivate these latent virtues. Number 7, right effort is closely associated with right mindfulness. It is the constant mindfulness with regard to body, kayanupasana, feelings, vedanupasana, thoughts, chittinupasana, and mind objects, dhammanupasana. Mindfulness on these four objects tend to eradicate the misconceptions with regard to desirability, shubha, so-called happiness, sukha, permanence, nicha, and an immortal soul, atta, respectively. Number 2, right efforts and right mindfulness lead to right concentration. It is the one pointedness of the mind. A concentrated mind acts as a powerful aid to see things as they truly are by means of penetrative insight. Of these 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the first 2 are grouped in wisdom, panna, the second 3 in morality, shila, and the last 3 in concentration, samadhi. Shila, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Samadhi, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Panna, right understanding, right thoughts. According to the order of development, Shila, Samadhi, and Panna are the 3 stages of the path. Strictly speaking, from an ultimate standpoint, these factors that comprise the Noble Eightfold Path signify 8 mental properties, Chetasika, collectively found in the 4 classes of supramundane consciousness, Lokuttara Chitta, whose object is Nirvana. They are Panindriya, faculty of wisdom, Vitakka, initial application, Viratti, 3 abstinences, Virya, energy, Sati, mindfulness, and Ekagrita, one pointedness, respectively. All these factors denote the mental attitude of the aspirant who is striving to gain his deliverance. And this matter it continues. Then the next factor will deal about karma, as all living beings have karma as their own, Majjhima Nikaya states, and the chapter will further elaborate about the factor. And this is for the day, and I conclude it herewith, and the rest will continue tomorrow. Thanks for hearing, and perhaps you will be focusing on the vocabularies to improve it, so that you will be able to use it further when you will speak or write. Thank you very much. So that's all for today. Bye bye.